Hello and welcome. Are you sitting comfortably? I hope you all are. Welcome along to this very different sort of thing I am doing. I'm going to be doing a new series over on Facebook, and that is starting with season 1, which I already confirmed is going to be Norfolk, Suffolk and Lincolnshire. I can only go to neighbouring counties in season 2, which I haven't thought anything about yet, and I ain't done enough research into Lincolnshire and Suffolk, because we're going to start with our first 6 episodes as Norfolk. And today's episode is Ghosts and Legends of Ghost Myths and Legends of England. Let me get the title right. If we get the title right, we'll be fine, won't we? I hope you guys are looking forward to this. Now, the idea of this came to my head last night. I am very passionate about the urban legends and myths and real ghost stories in Norfolk and England, and I have done my research, and I hope that you will be able to join me on this, and I hope that all of you will enjoy this as well. And today we are going to be looking at 2 very big parts, and when I use a website I will tell you what the website is. If I use a book to help me with my research, I'll tell you what the book is. I've got a book with me today, and that book is the book we'll be using for the second part of this is Norfolk's A Ghost Hunter's Guide by Neil Story. If you want to buy that, it's got some lovely stories, and I'll be using this throughout our thing. Next week, episode 2, which we're going out about this same day next week, you'll be very interested in this, will be entirety of the Norfolk Broads. So I'll be picking some of the best ghost stories from the Norfolk Broads and bringing them to you. But today's episode isn't about the Norfolk Broads. It's about one is not really that known. The stories we're going to be talking about today, or what in one section is not really well known to people. The other is very well known, and the reason I picked this person out, we're going to look at the Norfolk side of him, but he will be cropping up in a few of the other locations we'll probably go to over time, because he does appear in Suffolk, and that is, of course, we're going to be looking at the Shrieking Pits of Almerton and Northreps, and the Black Shuck, the Legend of a Demon Dog. So welcome along, and we're going to begin with the Shrieking Pits, and I'm going to bring up a couple of pictures now. No, I'm not. So this is the Shrieking Pits of Almerton, I do believe, with the woodland behind. These are the Shrieking Pits of Almerton. There is one of them. Now, they are pits that were dug for medieval iron ore mining and smelting, and the 2 villages are quite close to Norfolk, short drive away from the seaside resort of Norfolk. I'll be using burialsandbeyond.com for a bit of my information for this, and they're known locally as the Shrieking Pits, and they're former shallow pits dug for the purpose of medieval iron ore. Why these pits are present in most of the Norfolk landscape is the ones that we're talking about today at Almerton and Northreps that are known by the moniker of the Shrieking Pits. Okay? Now, the reason I'm picking these 2 to start off with is I live in Northreps. So, many of you may know that, some of you may not. So, I live in Northreps, so the Shrieking Pit of Northreps is very close to my heart. In fact, I have stood next to that Shrieking Pit, and I have filmed, not filmed, but I've been up there. So, we're going to have a look at We're going to look at Almerton first before we go to there, and we're going to be looking at both pits, and I'll be talking about Almerton, hence why Almerton is on the pictures first, and I've got a couple of pictures of the Shrieking Pit of Northreps. So here we go. It said that a spectral figure, a woman, haunts the 5 pits at Almerton, wailing in search of her lost child. The common story is that the woman's baby was murdered by a jealous husband who believed the child not to be his. After killing and burying the child in a pit, he returned to dispatch with his wife. Subsequently, the grieving woman haunts the pits for eternity, searching for a long-dead child. She is said to be tall and clothed in white, and wanders and peers into the pits, waining her hands and shrieking or moaning. Said that she has been seen at all hours of the day and is not confined to the typical spectral hours of dusk and night. The same woman who is often described as appearing in a winding sheet, a shroud, has been seen roaming around the nearby area of Weybourne. However, the story is altered somewhat here, and many believe the Weybourne pits to have been created by Cromwell during the destruction of Weybourne Priory. And we'll get into a low. I think in episode 3 we'll be talking about one of my own personal experiences, as well as looking at some stories from a bit closer to home, which is Cromer and Sheringham. That'll be episode number 3 of this series. I can do lots about Norfolk, but I'll be doing one of my own things. So we're going to go and look at the... So, at Norfolk, by the anonymously titled Hungry Hill, the Shrieking Pits bear the legend of another grief-stricken woman. And we're going to go into those pits now. Ooh, fancy. Bouncy, bouncy, bouncy. And there is one of the picture. I've got 2 pictures of the Shrieking Pits of Norfolk to show you. And it is said that at midnight on February 24th, the spirit of a village girl named Esmeralda appears between the veil of the living and the dead. At the age of 17, Esmeralda had fallen in love with a wealthy but untrustworthy young farmer who conducted a secret relationship with her behind his wife's back. The local vicar discovered the affair and ordered them to draw it to a close. The farmer skulked back to his wife when, without a word from her sweetheart, Esmeralda, heartbroken, and she drifted into misery and depression, unable to forget her love. While taking a walk one frosty night, the desperate girl threw herself into a pit, an act which she immediately regretted. It is said she called for help for some time, but succumbed to her death. It is said her cries for help can still be heard on February 24th, the anniversary of her death. We're going to skip to the next picture of the Shrieking Pits here. This is another beautiful picture of the Shrieking Pit. I mean, it's one of the better ones, and this is probably the more common one. Not as greeny. Norfolk not only has the legend of a suicide teenager, but of several other stories of people disappearing into the pits, aside from a horse and cart. Another legend states that the pits are in fact called grave holes, and the shrieking comes from the lost souls of long-dead Viking heroes buried beneath the soil. Previously, the pits have been created as graves or a historical dwelling. An alternative and more likely reality is that the pits are the result of medieval iron ore digging and smelting pits from the 9th and 11th century. Nevertheless, the legend prevails and Norfolk Shrieking Pits continue their wailing, but ghost or none, you'll do well to mind your step. So yeah, the Shrieking Pits are a very interesting subject, and you know, throughout England's history, no matter where you look, there's these stories of women in white. You've got the brown lady, you've got brown ladies, white women, and there always seem to be women who have either lost children, or, you know, there's other stories of women losing children, women who fall in love on the wedding day, and they're known as women in white. And they're not just found in British culture, they're found all over the world, in Japan, America, Mexico. So it's not very, and you're going to obviously come across this a lot throughout the series, and especially in Suffolk and Lincolnshire, I'll probably find a few. And we'll probably do a subject on this, and I'll probably do a special where I just talk about women of white from the world, because it's an interesting subject, and it's interesting that all of these stories have a grief-stricken teenager who's fallen in love in an affair or lost a child out of marriage, and that child gets murdered, and then a woman murders herself. And it's very interesting that all these stories follow a similar suit and have a grief-stricken woman. But next, we're going to head into the depths of hell and fire and brimstone as we look at a story that I'm going to talk about the legend of Black Shuck after I talk about a close personal experience of mine. And I'm going to be reading the next set of books and stories from Neil Story's The Norfolk the Ghost Hunting Guide, as I've said. But the Shrieking Pits are not only confined to Norfolk, there's Shrieking Pits all over the place, or shrieking holes and shrieking women. You've got haunted castles, haunted priories, ruins. And when we go into Sheringham, I'll talk about a personal close experience I had at Sheringham Priory as well. And all of this leads you to wonder, is this reality or truth? Well, the next one I can either say is truth or reality, and I'll tell you why. It didn't work properly. It did a little shake. I don't know why. And that is the demon dog, Black Shuck. One night, when I was a young lad, I was probably about 16 or 17 at the time, I went out for a walk in the evening. Winter time, so it's already getting dark. I took our Shih Tzu out, Magic, who's no longer with us, when I was living at home with my parents. And I only got very far down the road, and I heard a massive dog bark. And this wasn't a small dog. This had to be, you know, you could tell from the bark it had to be a huge dog. And where the bark came from, I did not see anything. If that was Black Shuck, I don't know. I'm not saying it is, I'm not saying it was. I just thought I'd throw in a personal experience I've had with paranormal, and that is one of the more scariest experiences I've had with the paranormal, other than the one I'll get into showing in private, which didn't really scare me. It kind of moved me a bit, but we'll get into that in episode 3. But we're going to go and look in. And it doesn't matter if I read from a book or anything, because no matter what I do, every story of Black Shuck is similar. And we're going to look at how this is quite a long chapter, so you're going to be in for the ride with me, and hopefully you'll enjoy this. Of course, if you want to read this yourself, you can go on Amazon, I think. Norfolk, a Ghost Hunting Guide, Google it, and you'll probably find a way of buying a copy. And if you really want one, I'll find you one and send it to you. So, Norfolk Coast Black Shuck, the Devil Dog. One of the most ancient tales found along the Norfolk coast is that the great shaggy black devil dog, known by a variety of names, Old Shuck and Shuck Dog, and the most popular, Black Shuck. Alleged sightings and spectral activities ascribed to Shuck are particularly prevalent in the area between Weybourne and Overstrand, which is not good because I live behind Overstrand over the hill. Notably, Shuck's lane between Beeston and Overstrand, along with the great black dog, is supposed to lope in twilight and through the hours of the darkness said to date back centuries. It's been suggested that Shuck is derived from the Saxon word suka, meaning devil. Others suggest that, bearing in mind our country's Viking past, a Scandinavian origin with overtones of the cult of the Hound of Odin. Perhaps the dog is a lost divinity or a demon of ancients who no longer receive his skeptical ventures and now seeks to claim souls in reputation. Other accounts of the beast, hounded down by generations of Norfolk fishermen, tells of a tall-masted trading vessel foundering during a hollow storm in the dangerous waters of Cromer in the early 18th century. Turning landward, the ship ended up grounded at Salthouse, where the furious waves caused it to begin to break up. The crew made a desperate bid to get ashore and chanced diving into the boiling waves and swimming to land. All were lost, and the bodies of the captain and his wolfhound were discovered among the smashed wreck, washed up on the beach the following day. The jaws of the huge dog were still fastened to the captain's reef jacket, the captain's dead hand continuing to grip the collar of the dog in a mutiny testimony to their loyalty in their final struggle against the waves. The dog was unceremoniously buried on the beach. The captain laid to rest in an unmarked grave in the churchyard. Reports of strange spectacle soon began to record in the area. Before the winter was over, there were more storms. But what was that sound above the crashing waves? Was it the wind howling, or instead the unquiet spirit of a wolfhound baying for his master? So, I'm not going to read all of this. We're going to go into some of the stories, but because the next bit, that's kind of the origin of the story. And some people say it was a Viking dog. Some people say it was a captain's dog. There's other stories that just say it's a shapeshifter. I don't know if we'll go into that. And there's all these different theories, and if you depend on where you can look online. Some people say it's a shapeshifter and it can change shapes. Some people say it's a terrestrial demon that can move around, and it's quite an interesting thing that is such carved into the Norfolk mythology that some people have wind chimes. You've got the old Shuck here, and I think that's from the original Overstrand sign, village sign, and they had Black Shuck a part of that sign for years. Let's have a so. And the thing what's missing is when the beast has passed or disappears, the smell of brimstone fills the air and lingers. Scorch marks have also been recorded. Some tales, particularly from the notorious ones of Shuck around Cromer area, state that the beast is headless, but he still has a single eye blazing like a coal from Hell itself. Floating where his head should have been, it's said that anyone seeing the beast would have a member of his or her family, or indeed themselves, go mad or die within a year. Well, I'm already mad, so that probably explains that. Another variety tells of an antidote. If you hold your tongue and do not tell anyone what you saw for a whole year, the evil, the curse of the devil dog will be removed from you and your family. So, and there's also stories that he has, as I showed you the first picture, red eyes and it's spitting, and if you see him, you're meant to die. They were sent ahead of their wagon trains, a pony disguised with tattered black cloth thrown over in a dark loaf and tied to its neck. Black Shuck, while there is undoubted creating the story of Black Shuck, the counts of his appearance of resurgence in the 18th and 19th century, when the tale fitted to use the smugglers who operated all along the Norfolk coast. They were sent ahead of head of the wagon train of contraband, a pony disguised with a tattered black cloth thrown over it and a dark lantern tied around its neck. Knowing the the fearing of fate, anyone who saw the devil dog, few locals would hang about, and the country they see close up with the lumbering form with an eerie glowing eye was substitute or the real phantom beast. And of course, later on in the series, we thought, I think I'll do it on the last episode. I will be doing an entire section on Anne Boleyn, and we'll talk about how she does. There's all sorts of stories. And there's one in here which I don't think is actually mentioned in here because this goes on for quite a while. One of the stories I know about the black dog, and I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to do my own version of the story because it's one I've heard most. Also, without doubt, Black Shuck was brought to the attention of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, when he decided to take some of our healthy Norfolk air in 1901. So the idea of Black Shuck, many people think that what is it called? Now in the Baskervilles came from the idea of Black Shuck. Old hunts down in Wales, there's all sorts. One of the stories I love, I'm not sure the dates, and I can't find it online when I was trying to research this and do this episode for you guys. I don't know how long we've been recording for, so you have to bear with me. But a young man came and stayed in a house in Overstrand, I do believe, if my memory serves me well. And while staying there, he stayed there for a week, and every night he would hear... The first night he stayed there, he heard padding around the outside of his house, walking around, and the next morning he got up and he went and looked, and there was the footprints of this massive dog. And then the next night he heard scratching at the door, and he thought nothing of it, and then he went to bed. He ignored it. He was a bit scared. He went, he's like, okay, I can't sleep, so he just kind of sat there listening to the noise, and then that time passed. And the next thing you know, the next morning he got up and he looked outside this little shack's door and there was massive claw marks on the door. The next night that door broke down and he got dragged out by Black Shuck, leg first, screaming. The villagers came out and helped him. And that's one of the more known stories I know of Black Shuck, and it's quite an interesting one. He continued staying there, but he never had any experiences after that. And I think one of the things what you need to realise with me is I have opinions on stuff, and... the way I look at things in a retrospect of Black Shuck and the Shrieking Pits is if enough people report it and everything's so similar, and if you kind of, it's passed down centuries, is there going to be some truth to it? Well, probably there is. But my issue with the Shrieking Pits and my issue with Black Shuck is with the tourists and stuff, and it's such a big part of the country to the point where there's even a brewery that does Black Shuck beer and stout and stuff in Norfolk. It's such a part of the, countryside and the thing. Is there a truth to it? Maybe. But to my report of this is there hasn't been any sighting since, for many years now. I think the last one is, as I say, that was probably the 60s or 70s, and which is the last known I know of. So hopefully you've all sat back and relaxed and can sleep tonight after hearing some of these terrifying tales with me. The next time we're going to hit the Broads. And I think when we hit the Broads, my friends, we're going to see how scary Norfolk can truly be. I want to thank you for joining me for this 20-minute journey into some of the darker stories. And some episodes are going to be longer, some episodes are going to be shorter. It depends on what we're discussing. But in episode 2, we're going to discuss the Norfolk Broads, which will come out next week. We'll also, the week after, we'll be discussing Sheringham, Cromer, some of the true ghost stories around those areas. We're also going to be discussing... we're also going to be throwing in some of the stories about Shipton. So it's not just going to be myths and legends, it's going to be true stories into this as well. And we're going to be talking about the lost city of Shipton, or the lost town of Shipton, what hands under the sea, some of the ghost stories that surround that. But as I say, don't ever take what I say for granted, because this could be true. And Black Shuck could be coming to visit you if you come to Norfolk. So be careful if you see a big dog. Thanks for watching, guys. Sleep tight. Hope you sleep well.